So welcome everyone to the first Consumer Pyramids Research Seminar Series. Ashwini Deshpande from Ashoka University is going to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the gendered division of paid and unpaid work, evidence from India. Before we dive into the talk, I want to tell you a little bit about this thing because this is a new thing for all of us at CMIE and presumably for all of you as well. So the Consumer Pyramids Research Seminar Series is going to be a monthly seminar series. It's going to feature work based on the Consumer Pyramids Household Survey. And it's primarily a platform for researchers to receive critical and technical feedback from their peers, as well as to engage with the larger research community. If you are using Consumer Pyramids household data and you'd like to present, please let us know. The email address is kkrishnan@cmi.com. We already have quite a few speakers lined up, probably until about January. But if there's something in the works where you feel like you'd like to get feedback and present to a wider audience, just write to me and we'll be happy to include you in the calendar. So let me tell you a little bit about today's speaker. Today's speaker is Ashwini Deshpande. For those of you that don't know, Ashwini is a professor of economics at Ashoka University. She is the founding director of the Center for Economic Data and Analysis, or CEDA. You can follow Ashwini, of course, by going to Ashoka University's website, but also on Twitter. You can also follow CEDA on Twitter. If you aren't following them already, I recommend that you do. CEDA is doing some really great work, and there are some very interesting things in the pipeline. So you should be actively following both of these Twitter handles. Ashwini has a wealth of work on the economics of discrimination and affirmative action, with a very strong focus on caste and gender in India. I told Ashwini and Vidya while we were waiting before letting the audience in that I was going to embarrass myself by telling all of you one paper each of Ashwini's and Vidya's that I really like and that I think is worth reading if you haven't already. Ashwini has a great paper in the AER from 2000 on whether caste still defines disparity, and she looked at Kerala in that context. The paper is 20 years old, and Ashwini was just saying she's getting ready to review it and to write a part 2 of that paper. The reason I bring it up is, I think for me, it really sets the tone and the agenda for a lot of work that Ashwini has done since then. The questions that she poses there, questions about caste, about inequality, are as relevant today as they were 20 years ago, if not more. And I would encourage all of you to take a look at it if you haven't already. We also have a discussant today. Today's discussant is Vidya Soundararajan. Vidya is an assistant professor at IIM Bangalore. She is a labor economist who studies labor market institutions, policies, and regulations, and their collective implications for workplaces and workers in developing countries. Vidya can also be followed on Twitter at Vidya S. Rajan. So please do follow her if you aren't already. Here's a paper of Vidya's that I really like. Vidya published this last year on the Journal of Development Economics. It's titled The Heterogeneous Effects of Imperfectly Enforced Minimum Wages in Low-Wage Labor Markets. It's a great paper for a bunch of reasons. I like it a lot because I'm a labor economist. I like any paper that adds to the wealth of evidence that labor markets are probably monopsonistic. In this case, I really enjoy this paper because of the way in which Vidya exploits state-level variation in minimum wages as well as enforcement mechanisms. And she's really able to use that to put together a very compelling paper on the effects of minimum wages. So please do check it out. Okay, so without wasting a lot of time, today's topic and the format. So the topic, as I said at the very top, is the COVID-19 pandemic and the gender division of paid and unpaid work, evidence from India. The presentation will end, Ashwini's presentation will end roughly around 7 p.m. After that, we have another 30 minutes for discussion and Q&A. Vidya gets first dibs, so she gets all the time that she wants to discuss the paper in length and provide all the feedback that she wants. After that, there's time left over for Q&A. The way Q&A will work is all of you attendees, everyone here, can type in your questions in the Q&A box, which you can find on the bottom of the Zoom webinar. Please ask your questions there. I am going to use my dictatorship powers to moderate the discussion, and hopefully we'll have a very interesting and lively conversation. And if you stick around all the way until the end, I have a couple of announcements, and so that'll be fun as well. Okay, so with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Ashwini. Ashwini, thank you so much for being the first speaker at the Consumer Pyramids Research Seminar Series. Over to you.
Thank you, Kaushik. I am going to share my screen now. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Kaushik and Mahesh. I'm assuming he's in the audience, for inviting me to present, to be the first speaker actually in this seminar series, which I'm sure is going to emerge as one of the important seminar series to watch out for in the Indian context, because the state of the data bases is such that CMI is a very valuable resource for researchers, because it's a high frequency panel, and all of us want to be able to analyze and comment on developments in real time, and CMI allows us to do that. So first of all, thank you for providing this resource, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Kaushik mentioned my paper from 20 years ago, and it's true that that was one of the first papers I wrote on caste inequality, because my PhD is actually not on any of these topics. I worked on international debt. I was not trained to analyze household surveys or anything like that. And so a lot of it has been just learning by doing. And I look forward to learning again today through Vidya's comments and through your questions. So again, thank you for that opportunity. Let me, without further ado, start the presentation. And what I have been thinking about in the last few months is, can pandemics or large negative shocks change or alter gendered norms in the labor market, at home, in society in general? And there is a reason to think about these questions, because there have been episodes in history where large demographic shocks, be it in the form of a pandemic or a war and things like that, have contributed to shifting established gendered norms, both in the labor market as well as at home, because the two are related, as I'm going to discuss a little bit later. Specifically in the context of India, there's been a recent paper, which has looked at the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, and it finds that in temporarily, Indian female labor force participation rate increased as a result of the pandemic. Why did it happen? So of course it's speculative, but the belief is that either one is that because the mortality rate was high and many men ended up dying. So it was a distressed labor supply by the widows, as well as rising wages in the labor market, both of which induced women to join labor market in larger proportions than they were doing before the Spanish flu. Unfortunately, the effect didn't last. So by the time you come to 1931, etc., it's gone back to its 1918 level, but it did have the capacity to shift female labor force participation, at least initially. And in India, actually, LinkedIn, which is the employment, what is it? It's a portal which discusses where job postings and where people. They have brought out a paper based on their internal data, which actually shows an increase of 7 percentage points in female labor force participation rate between April and July 2020. So that's a phenomenal increase, it's really something. It was something that fits into the story of a large negative shock, increasing female labor force participation by changing gender norms. So it's something definitely worth investigating. But just as there's a LinkedIn data, there's evidence from other data sources as well. For example, Sonal Desai's team at NCAER, they've been doing a Delhi metropolitan area survey. So they have a panel that they survey every month or every 2 months or something. And they find actually that the absolute loss of employment was greater for men compared to women. But in relative terms, they find that women actually suffered more. So there are ways in which they've looked at the relative changes. There is the Azim Premji University team, Surabhi Kesar et al. Their surveys, unfortunately, the data that's available is still May, and I believe that there are second surveys in the field. But they also find that women, especially rural women, were more likely to lose employment. Um, there is a Gaurav Chiplunkar et al. Paper that they also looked at job postings on an employment portal called shine.com. And they've also looked at the first 2 months of the pandemic. And they find that there's a drastic decrease in job postings which are in female dominated occupations. So they find that the first month of the pandemic had serious adverse effects on job availability for younger people and for women. And my earlier sort of a rough paper based upon the first month of the pandemic data also showed that disproportionately, relatively speaking, the pandemic affected women. So even though in absolute terms, more men lost jobs, but conditional on being employed previously, women, relatively speaking, lost jobs more. So on the one hand, there's a LinkedIn report. On the other hand, there's this other small body of evidence which suggests that women may have been worse sufferers than men. Of course, it depends on what the metric is. So, it's all these papers are not comparing this exact same thing. And so we have to be a little bit cautious when we compare the evidence. But anyway, it's definitely something worth investigating. Now, elsewhere in the world too, this investigation is going on. And now there's in fact a fairly nice body of work that's looking at the gendered impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And everywhere there have been lockdowns as a sort of chief instrument to contain the spread of COVID-19, which have led to stoppage, either a complete stoppage or a slowing down on economic activity. And everywhere in the world, there's been an increase in unemployment. So the point is that if an unemployment increase, is it more likely to affect men in the labor force or women? So in the US, for example, if you look at the previous recession in the last decade, you find that men lost employment more in the previous recession, whereas in the COVID-19 pandemic-induced recession, in the US, the evidence seems to be that more women are not just likely, but actually more women are moving out of the labor force than men. Globally, as well as particularly in the US. The latest version of the paper, I cite data from the September 2020 labor force survey. And you find that relative to last September and even relative to last month, there's been an exodus of women from the labor force, which is much higher than the exodus of men from the labor force. So this is not just unemployment, this is women leaving the labor force. And a lot of it has to do with school closures, childcare responsibilities, etc. And there is evidence from other parts of the world as well, United States. I already talked about that, but this Allen paper that I'm referring to refers to the early evidence from the United States. There's Andrew et al. For the UK, there's Fareh et al. For Spain, Ikarakan and Mehmich for Turkey, all these papers highlight the disproportionately negative impacts on women's employment, as well as work burden at home relative to men. So there's something to be, so there is a common pattern that you see in the COVID-19 pandemic all over the world. And the reasons are pretty similar. In terms of unemployment, why women are bearing the brunt of unemployment in larger proportion than men, it's because a large number of industries that have been shut for a long time because of the needs of social distancing are precisely the industries that employ large numbers of women. And so whether it's restaurants, hospitality, beauty-related industries, a lot of departmental stores, etc., these are all sectors that employ a large number of women, particularly globally. And these expected to remain either completely shut or certainly on reduced level of activity for the foreseeable future. And these tend to be female dominated. The other issue is because of the needs of social distancing, a lot of paid care work that women do, whether it's nannies or cooks or au pairs and going into people's homes, etc. These workers have been especially vulnerable because, again, of social distancing norm. So whether it is going out of, whether it's working in these hospitality, etc. kinds of sectors, or it is working in people's homes, female-dominated jobs have been more vulnerable and in fact have been shut down more than male-dominated jobs. So there is fair amount of reason to believe that the economic impacts of the pandemic are gendered. Also now, because schools have been closed for a long time in most parts of the world, or they have restarted on not in India but elsewhere on reduced shifts. So in the US particularly, this evidence is very strong that women who may not have lost jobs are leaving employment or leaving the labor force altogether because it's impossible to manage childcare and homeschooling with the needs of employment, even if it's work from home. Right? And so for all of these reasons, women are particularly vulnerable both to paid employment, to loss of paid employment, as well as to gender equality norms of housework sharing inside the home. And both of these things are linked. That's the global evidence. So I cited some important pieces of research for India earlier. All of those are important, and they give very critical insights into what's happening, but none of them are based on national level data. And so my previous sort of rough paper was also based upon CMI data till April, and this is the more worked out draft. It's still in draft form, so I still would like to get your feedback and make amends and improve the paper. But this is the first paper that presents evidence using national level data on paid employment, on hours spent on domestic work, and some early results on income. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first paper that shows data evidence on the gender gaps in all of these spheres at the national level. And as I said before, this is an updated version of an existing working paper, which has incorporated CMI's newly released data from May to August 2020. So before we plunge into the evidence from the CMI data, we need to remind ourselves of the pre-existing gender gaps in the Indian labor market. So female labor force participation rates are low and falling, have been falling over the last 2 decades in India. And female labor force participation rates, as we all know, include working women, that is women who are employed, as well as unemployed women, but those looking for work. So it includes both working, employed, as well as unemployed women. And so there is a large literature on both of these aspects, which I don't have the time to summarize, but I have worked on as a part of my other academic work as well. So we already are in a context of pre-existing large gender disparities in labor force participation rates and employment, where male labor force participation rates and male employment rates are much higher than female labor force participation rates and employment. I have a paper on gender gaps as well, and we find actually that even though female employment has increased, female education levels have increased dramatically in India over the last 10, 15 years, but the wage gap for regular salaried workers has actually not changed that much. And the unexplained part of the wage gap, which is seen as a proxy for labor market discrimination, actually continues to be very, very high in India. So there are pre-existing gender disparities in labor force participation rates and employment, and in the way the market rewards the same skills, the same education levels, what economists call wage earning characteristics. So the market values the male wage earning characteristics at a rate which is higher than the rate at which it values female labor earning wage earning characteristics. So there's evidence of market discrimination between men and women who are in the labor force and who are working. Now, the biggest fall in employment occurred in April 2020, which was the first month of the lockdown. And given the pre-existing gaps in labor force participation rates, in terms of absolute numbers, the absolute numbers of men who lost jobs was much larger than the absolute numbers of women who lost jobs. So it's about 104 million, I think is the CMI estimate for men who lost jobs in April 2020, and about 17 million women lost jobs in April 2020. So, that's not surprising given the pre-existing disparities. But the question is really, in relative terms, how do you assess the relative impact on men and women? So in absolute terms, no doubt, unlike the global trend, where in absolute numbers, more women have lost jobs or have left the labor force, in India, more men have lost jobs. So that's just to be clear, that's the result. So I have used in this paper, I've used two data sources. One is the CMI's Consumer Pyramids Household Survey, the CPHS, and I've used a little bit of data also from the Income Pyramids database, but that work is still in progress. So, it needs to be finished much more. Now, as we know, as I'm sure all of you who are attending today know, it's CMI has a panel of households, and each household is surveyed 3 times per year. And each of these is called a wave. So there are 3 waves per year, per household and per individual. And what I've used for looking at paid and unpaid work is I've looked at data from January 2019 to August 2020. So I've looked at 5 waves of data. And this includes 5 months of post-pandemic data. So April, May, June, July, August of 2020. These are the months which are post-pandemic, but it's 5 waves of data that I've used. For income, I haven't used the May 2020 data. I've just used the April 2020 data because, for reasons I'll explain when I come to the income part. So that's the data that I've used. What are the waves specifically? So wave number 16, which is January to April 2019, wave 17, May to August 2019, wave 18, which is September to December 2019, wave 19, Jan to April 2020, and wave 20, which is May to August 2020. So these are the waves that I have data for. And these waves allow me to construct a pre and post-pandemic panel of individuals. So what again, I'll come to that a little bit later. So there are 2 ways in which you can construct the panel, and I'll explain both to you. One is just by the way in which I've described. I already said that. I don't know why this bullet point is repeated. So looking at just the waves and just looking at total employment, what's happening to total employment. In the earlier version of the working paper, I actually have tracked from January 2016, from the time that CMI has employment data. I've plotted the total employment rate and unemployment rate for urban and rural India. And you basically find that there are small ups and downs, but by and large, it's pretty stable till March of 2020. So between January 2016 and March 2020, the unemployment rate and the employment rate doesn't change by all that much. The big drop comes in April 2020, which is the first month of the lockdown. So what I plotted here is the first blue line is the January 2019 to March 2020, which are the months relevant to the waves that I am looking at. So it's the average, it's the total employment, average total employment in million persons. So this is I think 413 million, which is the average employment for between January 2019 and March 2020. This goes down to about 260 million for all India, for everyone in April 2020. So you see a big decline from the previous year's average to April 2020. You see that for all India, total, all India male, urban, rural, male, female, etc. So in all of these, now, of course, because the total absolute numbers for women are much smaller than men, so when you draw a scale from 0 to going to 450, things like 17, etc. come, so the numbers, the heights of the bars for women are very small. So you can't see the drop. If I do it separately, you can see that the drop is pretty big as for women as well, relative to their previous employment. So relative to their previous employment, the drop is actually bigger for rural women, the biggest category. So the employment in April 2020 for rural women was only 57% of its previous year's employment, as opposed to about 70% for all India total, right? So rural women were the worst, sort of proportionately speaking, were the worst sufferers because of the loss of employment. So as I said before, you can make a panel in 2 different ways, and I've actually done the entire estimation using both the panels. One panel is just looking at all the individuals who appear in each of these waves. So you look at individuals in wave 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then you make a panel of individuals who are present almost in each of these waves, right? So that's a wave-wise panel. I have also constructed what I call the lockdown panel. Now, the lockdown panel, the reason I'm calling it that is because this is a panel of individuals who were observed in April 2020, because that was the month of the sharpest decline in employment. So this is, so you look at individuals in April 2020 and you see them, you can track them back, from April 2019, August 2019, December 2019, April 2020, and then August 2020. So you have 5 observations per person also for this lockdown panel. And you can do it by wave as well, So, but I'm presenting today results from the lockdown panel because you see the largest fluctuation, because what's happening is that after April, employment has started to recover. So when you do it wave-wise, April, the waves, April is getting clubbed with March, February, and January, right? And so the contraction appears smaller, and so the increase also appears, the recovery also appears smaller. Whereas if you do month to month, looking at the month that suffered the worst contraction, you can get a range of what actually the scale of what, the drop in employment as well as the recovery. So these are just the proportion of employed, unemployed, and out of the labor force proportions for male, female for each of these months. The way I have defined unemployment after discussing with Mahesh Vyas, the CEO of CMI, is that for people for individuals for whom the employment question is applicable, CMI asks 4 questions. 4 questions about work. Are you working? Are you not working but looking for work? Not working but willing to work? And not working, not looking, not willing. So the not working, not willing, not looking is the out of the labor force. Working are clearly employed. And the other 2 categories, which is not working but looking, or not working but willing to work, these are classified as unemployed. So you see here basically that for the unemployment rates this way, and we can talk about the differences in unemployment rates between CMI and other data sources at another time. I don't have the time to go into all that right now, but basically you see that the unemployment rates are very small for both men and women, the open unemployment rates. So basically the employment rates are very close to labor force participation rates, particularly for women, right? And so the trends are absolutely the same for labor force participation rates or employment rates. So what I've looked at is employment rates, but you could do the exact same analysis with labor force participation rates as well. Okay, so these are some. I'm going to show you a bunch of graphs which are just data summaries on the lockdown panel. Lockdown panel is individuals who were observed in April 2020, and then you observe them back, and then you have 1 more month of data on these individuals in August 2020, and that's what I've included here. The tall bars are male, and the small blue bars are female. So this is showing mean employment, male, female, by rural, urban. Okay, so you see here that there is as expected, as we saw, there's a sharp drop in April 2020, and then there is a recovery in August 2020. And for men, it's more or less back to the pre-pandemic period. Okay. For women, you will see that for rural women, it's still not. There's been quite a lot of recovery, but for urban women, the picture it varies a little bit by education levels, particularly. So we'll look at that. So this is the summary of the rural-urban picture. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. This is by broad educational categories. And again, for these 5 months, and male and female, etc. Now, the last category for both men and women are the highly educated men and women, which is people with postgraduate education and above. Okay, so for the blue bars are women and the red bars are men. And I want you to just look at the female picture, because I think that there's something quite interesting. And so if you look at the blue bars, in each time period, you see that sort of a U shape, which is that labor force participation rate or employment rates are higher for the completely illiterate women and the highly educated women, and they are lower in between, which is a phenomenon that's observed in several parts of the world. So you see that in April, this is April 2019, August 2019, December 2019. Now in April 2020, when employment contracted overall, including for women, particularly for rural women, you actually see that the proportion of employed for PG and above, you see that it actually is higher. So all this adds up to, so this is the proportion of women who are postgraduate and above in April 2020. Okay, so these are women observed in April 2020, and what is the proportion that they are, what proportion is employed, right? And so you see that these women, probably because they could work from home, or they could do consulting work or self-employment work or whatever, they were able to retain employment at a time when other categories of women had to were let go, particularly illiterate women. So the biggest fall in employment really comes from illiterate women, which is not surprising because it's the daily wage workers, the casual workers, the most vulnerable set of group of workers lost jobs in the complete lockdown because their jobs were such that could not be done from home. They had to be at their workplace, and at a time of total lockdown, they were not able to. But when you come to August 2020, when there's an overall recovery for all sections of industry, and there's been a gradual unlocking, you see a decline in the employment proportions for the most educated women. And this is, it's not, I'm not able to corroborate this with CMI data, but this fits in with a lot of anecdotal evidence that's coming from journalistic accounts. And it certainly fits in with the evidence that you see in the United States and in other developing countries, that women who have proper desk jobs, who are educated, who can work from home, they are voluntarily leaving employment because the pressures of childcare and homeschooling, and just managing everything domestically. So even though they have the ability to work from home, it is just they don't have the bandwidth. It's becoming increasingly difficult for women, particularly because of childcare responsibilities and school closures, closures of creches, etc., to continue to be in employment. So at a time when for all other categories of women, employment and men, employment is going up, for the highly educated women, actually, the average employment has come down in August 2020. So it's not to do with the lockdown, but it's to do with the closures in other parts of the economy and society that have made the domestic work burden more onerous, particularly the childcare burden more onerous for women. That's the guess. I mean, obviously, this data doesn't allow me to check for that explicitly, whether the school closures have an effect on that or not, but it's highly likely that this is the story because this is the story everywhere else. And if you look at, again here, children, and whereas for men with the highest education category, you actually see a more or less a complete recovery. PG and above men have made not a full recovery, but a very high recovery back to the pre-pandemic levels. So this is not a factor affecting men, but it definitely is so it's a factor that we need to talk about when we look at gender gaps. Okay, now when you look at married versus unmarried, and with children, so no children, very young children below 5 years of age, and children between 6 and 18. On the left hand side, you have the graph for married women. So I've combined the marriage categories into 3 categories. One is never married, so young women who have not been married yet, currently married, and ever married, which means women who were married earlier but are single now. So this is divorced, widowed, separated, etc. And labor employment rates of ever married women have been the highest in all periods. And the hierarchy is very clear: never unmarried, currently married, ever married, and that hierarchy sort of continues through all the phases. So it's not so much about marriage as much as it is about childcare, because here you see If you look at the middle bar, which is children below 5 years of age, see that in the pre-pandemic months, especially in April 20, which is exactly 1 year ago, women with children below 5 years of age were not necessarily had, they were at par in terms of employment rates with women with children 6 and 8. But by the time you come to August 2020, you see a very clear hierarchy, which is women with no children have the highest employment rates compared to, followed by women with older children, and women with children below 5 have the lowest. The pattern for men is exactly the opposite in August 2020. So men with children below 5 years of age have the highest mean employment of the three categories. So again, this is not the causation or anything like that. It's not even correlation. It's just telling you that there is some the stylized, the summary statistics indicate that childcare responsibilities might be responsible for what we see in terms of the withdrawal of postgraduate and above women from the labor force in August 2020. Okay. In terms of social groups, again, you can look at the broad caste tribe categories, the administrative categories of SC, ST, etc. CMI has data on all religions. It's too many bars. So basically, I just looked at Christian, Hindu, and Muslim. Again, for women, you see Christian women have the highest labor force have highest employment levels, followed by Hindu, followed by Muslim. And this hierarchy, again, you see in April 2020, there was a decline in all three groups, but this hierarchy doesn't really change for women through the pandemic. And even for men, the hierarchy, the relative employment levels, mean averages remain the same. Also for these broadcast type categories, the loss in employment was the worst for SCs, and that I've shown in another paper as well, using again CMI data. But in terms of recovery, now that we have recovered, again, you see that the pre-pandemic patterns seem to have been re-established. So there was a worsening in caste gaps in April, but by August, we seem to be back to the old regular caste gap. So the point is that in terms of social group identity, the pandemic and its aftermath so far has not reversed or changed any of the traditional hierarchies, which are pretty substantial. So we do have substantial hierarchies, disparities between caste and tribe groups and between religious groups within both men and women, and those hierarchies continue. So the pandemic has not really been a great leveler in terms of sort of flattening these hierarchies, as many people believe that, oh, it's all, these hierarchies are not so important anymore. They continue to be as important as they were before. So that's the data on social groups. Now, when we want to look at the precise effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, we can do two things. We can look at the panel, the lockdown panel. We can do the wave panel as well. So we can look at the lockdown panel, and we can control for individual fixed effects. So every individual, there are differences between individuals, and so you control for time invariant factors of individuals that don't change, things like caste, religion, state of residence, etc. And so you control for all of that. But in that case, you can't control for lagged employment. Were you employed in the previous period? Okay. And it turns out that for things like wages or employment, whether what your past wage was or what your past employment was, that seems to have the strongest effect on your current employment and on current wages. So empirical researchers are often faced with this dilemma about what do I do? Do I control for past levels of the outcome that I'm interested in? Or do I control for individual fixed effects? In the paper, I have shown both. Here, I'm only presenting the lagged model, which is I've controlled for past levels of employment. So on the left-hand side, I have employment in period for individual I in period T. On the right-hand side, I have the employment for the individual I in period T minus 1. So because I take a 1 period lag, I lose out on 1 month of data. So instead of 5 months, now this is 4 months because I've lost out the first month. And this is what the picture looks like. So on the left-hand side panel shows me the trend for men. And the right-hand side panel tells us, relative to men, what was the difference in the employment probability for women relative to men. So it's showing us the difference between men and women and by month. So that's why it's called a double difference or difference in differences, right? And so we find that relative to December 2019, okay, the April 2019 now drops out because we've taken a 1 period lag. So the omitted month is August 2019. So relative to August, the first, this 0.0057. So you see that it lies on the zero line, which means that the probability of being employed in December 2019 was no different for men compared to August 2019. There was no change. Relative to August, in April, you see a 24 percentage point decline in the probability of being employed for men. So a huge drop, as we've seen before. But by August 2019, you actually see a reversal of that, and you see a pretty strong recovery for men. Okay, so in August 2020, men were about 11 percentage points more likely to be employed relative to August in the previous year. So recovery for men is pretty strong. And all this is controlling for lagged employment. So relative to men now, in December, there was no difference in probability of being employed for women relative to men in December relative to August, okay? In April, actually, now with this lockdown panel, you see that the gap between the probability of employment between men and women in August declined. And that could be now because after that, you see that PG women rise, and it's possible that that was contributing to it. But in August 2019, August 2020, controlling for lagged employment, women were about 9.5 percentage points less likely to be employed than men relative to August 1 year before, August 2019. So the gap between men and women again worsened, not only back to the pre-pandemic level, but it actually increased beyond the pre-pandemic level. So if you compare the pre-pandemic gaps between men and women in the probability of employment, in August 2020, the gap is larger. So in other words, women are less likely to be in employment in August 2020 compared to August 2019. And this could be, as I said, voluntarily women dropping out because of pressures of home, childcare work or whatever. Now, I've done some work in the context of West Bengal, and we find in that with Naila Kabir at LSE, and we find there a big demand side constraint for women's participation in economic activity is the not having suitable jobs available. Demand side as in demand for women's labor. And that is obviously an issue that we need to worry about in terms of whether there's going to be sufficient demand for female labor after the pandemic. However, there's another factor that we have to be aware of, which is that the region of South Asia and India have amongst the most unequal gender division of work in the world. And recently, the Times survey, just I was writing it, the Times survey came out, and that documents significant disparities in terms of time spent in housework between men and women across urban, rural, states, caste groups, etc., etc. I can't go into that right now. And in my paper with Naila Kabir on West Bengal, we also find that the social norm of women being seen as being primarily responsible for housework is one of the key reasons why women are not able to go out in paid employment. And this is not just the fact that they have to do the work themselves. Even if they have paid domestic help, they still have to get it done. So it's seen as either they do it themselves or they get it done, but it's primarily their responsibility. And often that burden of being seen as primarily responsible constrains their ability to participate in paid work. Okay. So given that there was the lockdown, given that there was work from home, men in the initial period, domestic helpers were not coming to help at home. Did that shift the needle on this at all? Okay. And it seemed like in April, it seemed like it had. Okay, so there was a significant increase so these are ANOVA estimates, so these are linear regressions run on the average hours spent on domestic work. And the question on domestic work in CMI data only starts from wave 20, wave 18. So you don't have questions on domestic work before wave 18. So for this particular set of individuals, the only comparable time period before the pandemic is December. So we have three rounds of data. And you see that between December 2019 and April 2020, the average for men increased significantly, such that the gender gap was very, really narrowed quite a lot. And that was a good news. It was also discussed pretty widely, because it seemed like finally, the gender norms inside the home were shifting. And why it's important is, apart from just the intrinsic equality that we must have inside the home, it also bodes well for women's ability to supply labor in the labor market. So, it sounded like green shoots of gender equality inside the home. But when you look at August 2020 again, unfortunately, the female hours have gone back more or less to the pre-pandemic level. The male hours have come down on the aggregate, but not quite to the pre-pandemic level. So the gap has again emerged, where women do more work on average than men, but men's average hours have not completely regressed back to the pre-pandemic level. So I don't know if that means anything. I don't know whether it'll change again, but it is what it is. So this is what the data shows. Okay, you can as I said, this is just the lockdown panel. You can look at the non-lockdown panel. You can look at every month. And again, you see that by August 2020, and if you separate this by rural and urban, you really see that the bulk of the regression is coming because of urban men, actually. So urban men, that had achieved more or less complete equality in April, you see them putting less hours of work, whereas rural men actually continue to put in more, their housework hours haven't really changed that much relative to April 2020. So the urban habits, because maybe urban recovery has been strong, men have gone back to work, domestic workers are back in the home, so men are now spending less time in domestic work. So this is not the lockdown panel, but this is just all the months for which this data is available. CMI has also asked about a bunch of questions about time spent on other activities. The one that I was struck by the most was the average hours spent with friends. And the reason that this is important, particularly for women, women's overall well-being and mental health, is because the hours spent with friends are hours spent away from the family, not physically away. You could be talking on the phone or whatever, but it is a very important social activity and a social space for women to decompress and to share or to unburden issues related to the workplace, issues related to even the home, because often the spousal relations are often not one in Indian families, a large number of Indian families, where women can freely talk about the in-laws or about stresses at work, etc. So for women, the ability to spend time with friends is a very important facility that allows them to de-stress. And a curtailment of this ability, I believe, has serious implications for their mental health. And a lot is being written about the pandemic and the worsening mental health of everybody, because everybody is feeling hemmed in and unable to go travel, unable to do regular activities, etc. And you see that for both in rural and urban areas, both for men and women, hours spent with friends drastically declined in April 2020. So you see this sharp decline. And the interesting thing is that in the pre-pandemic period, women spent more hours with friends than men, both in rural and urban areas. Whereas in the post-pandemic period, certainly in urban areas, in rural areas, the hours spent with friends for women has the relative position between men and women has reversed. So women now spend less have been spending fewer hours with friends relative to men in rural areas. In urban areas, by August 2020, you see a slight improvement, and it's sort of come down. In urban areas, also you see an improvement in August, but it's still below the pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown level. So hopefully this trend continues, and hopefully female hours increase, because as I said, it's a very crucial element of female lives to have the facility to spend time with friends. And again, it could be that the pressures of childcare, just being responsible, and those women who continue to work have an added pressure of working as well, work from home as well. And so this is the issue with time spent with friends. And I can't obviously draw any link with mental health right now, but it is just a background, it's a feature that we need to know, which has implications for mental health. Finally, now I will come to income, and I need just a few more minutes and I'll be done. And so CMI has asked about income from various sources. So they have total income, pension, dividend, wage income, interest income, provident fund, insurance, etc., etc. Okay. Now the blue dots are the mean for total income, and the red dots are a mean of wage income. And you see that for men, of course, there's a difference, but total income and wage income are again very, very close to each other. For women, it's actually almost identical. So whatever income women get, most of it is from wage income. For men, no, they do get other income from pensions and dividends, other kinds of income as well. But wage incomes and total incomes move together, and you see a drastic decline in April 2020 relative to December 2019 in total income and in wage income. And there's a regression which I haven't reported here in the slides, but it shows a decline of about 27 percentage points, I think, which is larger than the shrink in the contraction in the GDP as reported by the national figure, but it's in the same order of magnitude. So there's a drastic decline in April 2020, and I've only analyzed this for April 2020 because for the individuals who are observed in April 2020, the next round will be in August, and I don't believe that data is out yet. But I will update this obviously when that data becomes available. And of course, this is income. You can break by occupation, you can by rural, you can do lots of different things. And as I said, this is really just very preliminary right now. And so this is, these are people who were not unemployed. So this doesn't include people who are employed. And I was just trying to see for April 2020, the lockdown panel, what the trends in income have been for men and women. Now you see the bottom line, which is small trader and hawker, and it seems like it's almost flat. But the reason is because the incomes are much smaller compared to the incomes at the top level. And so again, in the axis, that's sort of getting flattened out. But there was a decline for this group as well. But basically what I was struck by, and I would like Kaushik and Mahesh to comment on this, because I want to also with there, of course, if you have explanations, and I'm not sure what my explanation is, that the biggest drop has been for in rural areas for the big farmers, both for men and women, followed by either small farmers or the sort of manager, legislator, the top category of workers for women. So again, that is not surprising because you see a decline. Well, actually, I don't know whether that's not surprising or not. So I honestly speaking, I was quite surprised. For women, actually, the three biggest categories are the big farmer, which is the purple line, the small farmer, which is the red line, and this sort of teal line, which is the manager, legislator, the top categories of employment. And I am struck by that, and I don't have a very good explanation. So I would look for some explanations here. For men, the two big categories of decline are, again, the biggest is the big farmer here. And I was struck by the fact that it's really rural incomes that seem to have shown a much greater decline. And I would like to understand whether if there's something wrong in what I'm doing, or whether this is actually the trend and what the reasons behind this trend might be. So anyway, the income work is very preliminary, and I would appreciate comments and questions so that I can finesse it better. Finally, concluding in time is, we know this from the comparative figures that the IMF recently released. The Economist has commented on it. Many international bodies have commented on the fact that the Indian economy has suffered more than most as a result of the lockdown and subsequently. So the GDP contraction in India has been much larger than the contraction in GDP amongst its peers, both within South Asia and within countries with similar levels of income. Employment is increasing definitely as the economy unlocks. Is it good news for the sort of more persistent, sort of slightly chronic problem of jobless growth? Does it mean that employment will continue to recover and push the rate of growth of GDP also, pull it along with it? That we'll have to see. What is going to happen to gender gaps in the future? Now I've just put a question mark here because this is still unfolding. Now, in terms of employment, at least the data so far does not suggest that there is a relative increase in employment or labor force participation rates of women relative to the pre-pandemic period. On the contrary, either the gaps have remained constant or they've worsened. I find that they've worsened, or my other estimate shows that they haven't really changed that significantly. Either way, I don't see the gender gap closing so far. And there doesn't seem to be any reason why it would close. Nothing else seems to be shifting so drastically that you would expect gender gaps to close. Also because as employment recovery is pulling men back into the labor force, the mechanism whereby women lose jobs and so push women into the labor market, as we saw in the case of flu or the World War II in Europe, you don't seem to have those preconditions here at the moment. Domestic work, the April closure of the gaps seemed very promising. By August, that promise seems to have slightly been diluted. But again, if overall there's an increase in male time spent in domestic work, that's good. And that will not maybe in the immediate short run, but in the medium to long run, that has the potential to free up women from the constraints and of the drudgery of housework, and maybe allow them to enter the labor market if there are jobs and if they wish to. Income, it's too early to say. I don't know the answer to that because we need to look at more data before we can say anything. Gender gaps in income. Of course, gaps in income are linked to gender gaps in employment. So as long as that doesn't shift too much, we can't see big shifts in gender gaps in income. There is another argument that's being made, particularly in the global literature, which is that as work from home is getting normalized, earlier, many employers would not prefer hiring women because they felt that women would ask for flexible work from home, flexi time, part time, etc., etc., and it was seen as it was a source of stigma for women workers because it was seen as an indicator that women valued domestic responsibility more than they valued their paid work responsibility. So they were not willing to give primacy to their paid employment responsibility. Will work from home, now that everybody or a lot of people are working from home, will the stigma attached to work from home go? That might happen. And therefore, will employers now be willing to be more open to hiring women in jobs that allow work from home? So obviously all jobs are not amenable to working from home, but the jobs that are amenable, will employers be willing to hire women more? And once schools reopen and the childcare responsibilities again go back to sort of the pre-pandemic period, will that push up women's labor force participation rate? It's a moot question, and we don't know the answer to that. So will an important source of employer discrimination, which was the presumed attachment that women had to the domestic sphere, will that employer discrimination reduce? The international literature commentators suggest that might happen. We'll have to wait and see whether that happens or not in India. My main point and main takeaway from this talk is that no matter what the direction is, the impacts of the pandemic and the lockdown and subsequent economic, recovery are gendered. They are not the same for men and women. So when people were losing jobs, they were not the same for men and women. Now that there's recovery, again, the impact is not the same for men and women. Domestic work sharing, is different. Hours are being spent by men and women, etc. So, and of course, the spread of the disease, women as frontline workers, Asha, Anganwadi, ANMs, etc., all of those. So no matter which dimension you look at, COVID-19 and its aftermath have significant gendered impacts. And therefore, we have to pay attention to the gender differences in each of these elements. And we need gender disaggregated data in real time. It doesn't help if it comes 2 years later, 3 years later, because by then it will be too late. And the rest of the world, India included, had made or had been making strides towards gender equality. So many of the gaps were, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Sorry, I take that back. Because labor force participation rates, the gap was actually increasing. But in certain other dimensions, there have been indications of greater gender equality. Certainly, the recognition that gender equality is an important goal to pursue is now a fairly, it's a recognition that is very widespread. I don't think anybody will question that need. And so we as a society and as an economy, we have to ensure that that remains our focus and that we don't lose sight of the need to make strides in gender, in terms of gender equality in economic outcomes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, and congratulations to CMI for starting this seminar series. It's an excellent way to sort of engage with the larger research community, and it's amazing that you've started this in order to be able to constantly and very actively engage with whoever's using the data and to understand real-time impacts based on the data that you're actually collecting, which is amazing. So a quick word on, I'm not a gender expert, but I'm going to wear my hat as a labor economist and try my best to discuss this paper today. And I'm going to keep the summary very short in the interest of time, because there are lots of amazing questions waiting there in the Q&A. So the summary is going to be very briefly on what the crux of the paper is, and just summarizing the different results a little bit. So what Ashwini's paper is finding is that there's a sharp decline in employment after the lockdown post-April 2020, which is bouncing back to reasonably normal pre-pandemic levels by August 2020, fully for men and urban women, but less so for rural women. And this amazing graph that she showed shows that for rural women, the bounce back has been, in general, rural areas have been very slow to sort of catch up and bounce back. And highly educated women suffered the least. And I'm going to just stick to employment and paid work here, and unpaid work will be commented upon a little bit when I discuss. So in terms of the difference in different results, there were, I think she presented the second model that's up here, but in the paper, there were two models, one with the fixed effects and the other with the lag dependent variable model. And what this shows is that April 2020, which is the base sort of quarter, compared to that, the employment gap, female from male, female minus male, actually went up in, compared to the base quarter of April 2019, in April 2020, the gap actually went up. And in August 2020, the post-lockdown, the gap actually went down. So this is seen both in the fixed effects model and in the lag dependent variable model. So to basically, it's essentially coming from male employment probability going down in April 2020, tremendously compared to April 2019, the base year. And the female employment probability relatively actually going up, which means that the gap is actually positive. And what happens post April 2020, in August 2020, when the lockdown ends, is that the gap is closing as per the fixed effects model, but as per the lag dependent variable model, which, as Ashwini has said in the paper, controlling for past employment is very important. Controlling for that, you actually find that the gap actually worsens compared to the pre-employment, pre-lockdown phase in April 2019, in the August 2020. So my discussion will be beginning based on the definitive model in employment, and then I'll talk a little bit about unpaid work and time at home. So in the difference in difference results, which is, I think, figure 5 and 6, these are really interesting and really elucidative, but it'll be interesting to dig down on what the mechanisms were. Like, why did male jobs, I mean, and it's also interesting that it's different from the international sort of picture on female jobs being affected more. So why were male jobs affected more compared to female jobs during lockdown? And would this be also in some sense related to male jobs bouncing back after the lockdown compared to the female jobs bounce back being low? And the number of reasons for this, possibly. Is it something to do with the composition of jobs? Definitely, that was one reason in the international picture, because women were engaged in certain kinds of jobs where actually they were made to lose jobs because of the lockdown. But is it something different for India? What is really causing this interesting shift in pattern in India in terms of male jobs being affected more during the lockdown? That's a very basic descriptive question, but that's just interesting to look at. And I mean, continuing with the same same figure. So on the left-hand side of figure 5 and 6, we saw that the male employment probability month by month, and in that, we saw that male employment probability actually went down in April 2020, and again bounced back up reasonably in August 2020 compared to the base quarter of April 2019. So could we likewise look at female employment probability? And the reason I'm asking this is, it's simply essentially the month dummies plus the interaction. But the reason I'm asking this is, would it be illustrative to see this quarter by quarter and compare it with April 2019? What was the change? In order to be able to see whether this gap was driven by male employment probability changing and female employment probability being more or less constant because it's already low to begin with, or it's something to do with both. So, I mean, I think that sort of breaking down into looking at both will be interesting in its own right. Just simply looking at female employment probability in its own right would be interesting. It's just a derivative of this figure, and just an extension would be really interesting to look at. And in the model again, might be interesting to look at, for example, in equation 2, which is the result that was presented today. I think there was this interesting discussion on whether to include fixed effects or not, and if we include the lagged dependent variable, which is lagged employment. And including lagged dependent variable or lagged employment in this case is really important, because conditional on previous employment, especially for women, conditional on being previously employed, whether they are going to lose their job during the pandemic was something really important, and has been observed anecdotally as well. So that this model, equation 2, in that sense makes a lot of sense. But the question is, could there be unobservables like, could there be unobservables like industry of employment or occupation that the women are engaged in? That could be also correlated with your outcome, that can actually drive some of these results. So in that sense, individual fixed effects also being included in this lag dependent variable model would be interesting. I think that if we also add the individual fixed effects, the lag dependent variable wouldn't drop out. So my guess is that it's possible to add both in the same model, and the degrees of freedom won't be taken up. But if that is a problem, could we control for sort of other unobservable characteristics that also affect employment and are correlated with gender, like industry and occupation, fixed effects for those that can actually, so that will be important, because this figure 6 based on this equation was really interesting, and it tells us that the post-lockdown gap did actually worse than the pre-lockdown gap, So it might be interesting to actually do some of these robustness checks to actually sort of nail that down and to see that whether it's really that worse, or is it actually dependent on some other characteristics also. So that might be interesting to look at. So this is maybe one can think of this as a robustness in that sense. And the other thing is that this is typical in some different models where one might want to think about states themselves growing at different trajectories. For example, Kerala may be growing slowly in terms of employment than Andhra Pradesh, not due to COVID or anything, but just that the composition of workforce, the composition of industry, worker characteristics in different states, and it need not be states, it could also be industries, it could also be districts where the trends in employment is very different. And after all, different at the heart of it is actually looking at differential trends. The female times month dummy is actually capturing how the trends are changing for different groups. So in that sense, if the trends are being driven by something else, like the states itself growing differently, it might be useful as a robustness check again to control for state-specific trends or district-specific trends or even industry-specific trends to control for some of these underlying differences in how the industries or the states themselves are doing in the economy in general. And also, this is just a very simple sort of simplistic way of thinking about the model. In the sense, we looked at an event study type of approach, right? The equations 1 and 2 are looking at a month by month, which is really interesting in the sense that you're going deep down into every month, or every quarter, what is the impact. But can we just simply look at the pre and post? I mean, it might just say what is the effect of the lockdown. So that's something that's of course, we can control for quarter, fixed effects, and so on, and make it more control for seasonality and other things. But simply a pre and post would just say what is the effect of lockdown alone just before and after, 6 months before, 6 months after, or 3 months before and 3 months after. And that's quite illustrative on itself, and it'll give you the magnitude of just because the current model looks at April 2019 as a base year. So the comparison comes from April 2019, but can we just look at before and after, just before the lockdown started? And so that's a different research question perhaps, but it might be just useful also, given that the data is there. Okay, so this is about time. I mean, I'm coming to unpaid work and time spent on housework now. So this rise in men's work in April 2020 and the subsequent fall is very interesting. Can one dissect this based on other things? And I'm not sure if we can do this descriptively or if one needs to do a definitive model again, but could we think about how heterogeneity of women's education level, like either spouse or mother or somebody else in the household, is affecting how men are putting in work at home? Like their wives' occupation, wives' education level, number of children, presence of mother-in-law, and whether the men are employed at all, because there's a huge drop in men's employment, but maybe they're doing work at home only because they're not employed. Work from home is different, of course, but conditional unemployment, are there other factors like these at the household level that are affecting how much time men put in? And the bounce back again, I think that's really interesting. And maybe men started working more eventually, and then they're putting in less time. So that's something interesting to, as I said, the hypothesis could be that men are increasing their time on household work as spouses are more educated, for example. So that's like the bargaining story. And this is the point made about women voluntarily quitting labor force. So there is this nice table where there was employment, unemployment, and out of labor force, where this was summarized. I think, as rightly pointed out, unemployment is very low. So if you think about being in the labor force, it's probably mostly synonymous with being employed. But if it's out of labor force, and to the extent that one trusts that measure without thinking about any measurements error, could we just employ a similar model? And of course, there's a lot of blurring between out of labor force and being
unemployed
and all of that. But to the extent that the data measure it correctly, could we similarly try and do a different diff and undo some heterogeneity, again based on being children being there in the household? What is really, can we do a triple difference to sort of look at women quitting, women taking being out of the labor force? Is that dependent on some of these other characteristics? So that's an interesting model one can think about. And this is again just a curiosity thing, and subject to data available post May. Are also incomes and wages bouncing back after April? I think the presentation focused on until April 2020, but if one has the data beyond that, could we think about what happened beyond that? Because after all, income and wage bouncing back is more important as well. And the last thing is, again, is a bit off topic, but if to the extent that one can disaggregate wages, rural, urban, state level, could we just look at wages per se, daily wage, and how daily wage has been affected by the lockdown because of demand shrinking, even supply shrinking? Can we just look at the labor market effects? And that's probably a different paper, but yeah. Yeah, I think that's the end of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Vidya. Very nice comments. And most of them are well taken. I will just, I hope you'll share the slides with me later on, because a lot of it is future work to be done, etc. The quick things that I can answer is that the income data is only available till May, at least when I, publicly. So they have it. I mean, CMI has it, but they haven't released it publicly. And so I stopped at April only because it was my sort of lockdown, but I could do a pre-post using May as well. So yeah, so that's, your pre-post idea is very good. And I think I'm definitely going to start for the female employment thing also, by just doing a first simple pre-post and then going into, more monthly different depth. So that's well taken. On the inclusion of individual fixed effects in the lag model, it is possible. There are degrees of freedom. That's not an issue at all. But the last time I did it, I was told very categorically by many people that it is not okay to do it. And so then I went back to my Angrist and Pishti, read that chapter, etc. And they also seem to think that, I'm happy to do it, But the point is that there is an issue about whether it should be done or not, whether it's methodologically, whether it's okay or not. And given that I got this comment because in a previous presentation, not of this version, but an earlier version, I then decided to separate the two models. But what I could possibly do is do that other suggestion that you have, which is looking at female employment and do that month plus female into month. That would be, I think, very good. In terms of housework, slicing it in different ways, I didn't present it, and actually it's not in this version of the paper, but I had tried some differences earlier from the April data. But thanks for reminding me. What I'll do is I will reintroduce some of those things, and I will do more bins. So I'll create bins of women of different kinds, education bins, etc., and try to. So I just looked at rural, urban, and I looked at women whose husbands had lost jobs in. So the earlier bins that I had was women whose husbands had lost jobs in April versus not. Women who lived in nuclear families versus extended families, and rural urban. These were the three broad categories that I had looked at in the April paper. But I have more data and I can make more bins. So I will do that. But this idea of looking at the housework differences by bins is very much, something that I thought about. But a lot of it, what you've suggested is for future work, and it's absolutely fantastic. And Kaushik, thank you for the opportunity. Last time I presented a 1-hour seminar, I don't know when it was, because these have been 20 minutes, you have to summarize everything and you can't present half the stuff. So this has been really good for me to be present everything not everything, but a lot of the stuff. I didn't present all the tables or anything, but I will implement all of their suggestions, and hopefully I'll get some from you as well. On the income data, as I said, Vidya, the really curious question is whether incomes recovered or not. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't have that data, honestly. So we'll see. When they release it, we'll find out.
Yeah, no, that will be very interesting.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks, Vidya. Thanks for the comments. And and I look forward to the slides.
Yeah, definitely.